Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Nick Jain, CEO of IdeaScale, new father, and avid poker player. Please enjoy Nick Jain. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I'm here with Nick Jain, CEO of IdeaScale. He's a new father and an avid poker player. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me today, Mari. Really excited to be here.
Wonderful. I am super excited to chat with you about creativity. I can't wait to dig in. But before we get there, why don't you take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So as you said, I'm the CEO of IdeaScale. We are the largest innovation software company on the planet. We're working with the U.S. Coast Guard, Pfizer, Comcast, big household brands. And we help them be more creative. That is literally what our software does. We are the innovation software company. As for me personally, I grew up in a mix of Canada and India. I've been in the United States now 20 years. Business school at Harvard, became a dad about a couple weeks ago, and big into poker and running. Well, less running now because it's cold outside, but when the weather's better.
I bet. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That's so exciting. I love the kind of what your company does, the innovation and helping other organizations and companies tap into their own creativity. Tell us a little bit about like how much creativity shows up in your life, what it means to you to be creative, and then how does that translate into your business?
Sure. So it's funny. In a lot of creative endeavors, I actually suck. I'm terrible at music. I failed third grade art. I literally have an F sitting in my parents' basement somewhere in my third grade art project.
Oh, jeez.
Um, my art teacher was honest. All right.
Yeah.
I was terrible. I couldn't call within the lines. So in certain fields of creative endeavor, I suck. However, I do
Okay.
approach creativity in the things that I'm good at. So I'm a very mathematically and scientifically oriented person. That's what I got my degree in. And you don't
Mhm.
normally think of math as a very creative thing, right? It's like all numbers and logic. But where my creativity shows up is taking that mathematical skill set and applying it in really new context. I'll give like two examples, right? Number one's a fun example, poker. Poker, everyone talks about as this like entirely like, aggression, bluffing. Turns out poker is a lot about doing what's called mathematical creativity, finding new permutations of ways to play cards that others aren't thinking about. That's one aspect. And then second, in my professional life, so we often think about, marketing being a very creative thing with a lot of, images and these beautiful campaigns. But marketing well run is actually a series of experiments because when you run a marketing campaign, you don't know what's going to take off, right? Everyone likes to pretend like Mad Men is real, where you just invent these genius campaigns. No, marketing is you throw 20 pieces at something, 20 campaigns at a wall, you figure out what sticks. And turns out you can actually model that mathematically. So what at IdeaScale, we run a whole bunch of different marketing campaigns, and we know 95% of them are going to fail. And
Mhm.
that's okay. No one gets fired, no one gets in trouble. But the 5% that succeed, and sometimes they're really wacky things, but they succeed. And the only reason we're trying these wacky things is because we approach the problem mathematically, saying it's okay to fail 95% of the time, which in most other companies would get you fired.
Totally. I mean, what I'm hearing is there's so much psychological safety built into your company where people can throw out the wacky ideas and not be ridiculed for them or have other people, say, oh, dismiss it immediately. You are going to give it a try. And if it works, amazing. And if not, amazing. You learned something.
No, exactly. Our failures we learn from, and our successes more than pay for our failures. And
Hmm.
that you talk about its psychological safety, but that psychological safety stems from the fact that we approach the problem kind of mathematically, right?
Mm.
So we can actually be far more creative than a lot of other companies because we're thinking about the problem from a like what is right for the business, not necessarily what is creative from scratch.
I see. So interesting. I'm curious, when you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
I think to me it means one of two things. Number one, taking a solution from somewhere from another sphere of life and applying it in another context. So applying poetry to mathematics or applying art to sports, right? Or a hammer to a spaceship. You wouldn't think of a hammer on a spaceship, but it turns out it's actually pretty used there. So that's number one. And number two is, and this is probably rarer, but it's that, the de novo creativity, something like a flash of insight from God. Right? Something that's never been done before is not just a permutation of something else that already exists.
I love that. The I think oftentimes people assume all creativity is that flash of insight, that moment. And I
So,
I
so there's
know, and
actually
it sounds like you know too, that's not the whole truth.
so the one thing is there's somebody went to actually measure this. Approximately 99.94% of creative things are just permutations of existing things in a different context. So
Mhm.
there's only 0.06% of innovation or creativity that is actually like that flash of insight from nowhere,
Yeah.
from the ether.
Yeah. And
One out of 6,000.
that's, I mean, talk about numbers that expand your understanding of something. Yeah, I mean,
When
it's
someone says they did something creativity, there's only a 1 in 6,000 chance that it was like creativity from scratch. There's a
yeah,
5,999 over 6,000 chance that it was they just figured out how to do something that they already knew in a different context.
right. Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so I'm curious, growing up, you said between Canada and India, what was the experience of creativity in childhood for you? What's your earliest memory of being creative?
My earliest memory of being creative. Okay, so I grew up kind of lower middle class, right? Typical immigrant experience. Didn't, and my family didn't have a culture of allowance or money or anything like that. So I had no concept of money, but all the other kids are getting allowances, right? Now, again, my parents, were very kind, and if I ever wanted something legitimate, they would give it. But I didn't have an allowance, and I felt jealous of the other kids. So how do I earn some money? And I realized, and this was when the Pokemon trading card game was all the rage on the playgrounds. So I started a small business, and this is before like eBay and stuff existed, where I would buy cards and then figure out ways to arbitrage the price between them. So the playground price of cards was different than the cost of what are they called booster packs, where they sell 15 cards in these foil wrappers, and is different from the trading card shop price. So as a kid, as a 8-year-old kid on a playground, I was generating what is it like 30-40 bucks a month of income for like 6 months doing this. So that was my first create. Some kids start lemonade stands, which you always see on TV. I started a Pokemon trading card business for about 6 months.
I love it. I mean, was this like, did you see other people kind of this entrepreneurial spirit, or was this just like your little kid, 8-year-old brain going, how do I make money? And oh, this, I see a need and I'm gonna service it.
I mean, the money was the reason why I went the extra mile and actually did it. But the creativity aspect was I saw the need. I said, look, this kid wants a shiny Pikachu. Okay. A shiny
Mhm.
Pikachu is actually, it looks really cool. Pikachu is obviously super popular. It's super cute. It's the mascot. But turns out that's not a very valuable card. So I could go buy that for $1 from a trading shop and go sell it for 5 or 10 bucks on the playground.
I see.
So I
Yeah.
was again, I saw the need, and
Mhm.
then like figured out, hey, I can solve the need and make some profit along the way.
I love it. I mean, so creative and
Everyone wins, right? The kid got his Pikachu.
yeah.
I made a bit of money, and the trading card guy made some money too
I
along the
love
way.
it. Absolutely. Well, being that you're in this industry of helping other industries find creativity or be more creative or support creativity, what is it like when you come up against challenges or, those potentially immovable blocks that other people have, but you're trying to get them to move just a little bit to show them the potential.
Sure. I think there's two challenges we encounter all the time. The first challenge is people only want to see the great ideas. Okay,
Mm.
they don't appreciate that to find the great ideas, you have to wade through a lot of crap. And that's
Hmm.
part of the creative process. Like creativity is trying something new. And if it was easy to try something new, it would have
Yeah,
already been solved, right? You
right.
actually, most innovations, most inventions, most new ideas, most new art, most new book is just garbage. Okay? Once in a while you get a Shakespeare, but like 99% of the guys writing when Shakespeare was wrote garbage that we don't remember.
Hmm.
So that's number one, right? Like people want only the great stuff. They don't realize that you have to get a lot of, that brainstorming, a lot of crappy ideas before
Yeah.
you select the good ones. Number two is they think that great ideas come from great people. And there's a distinction
Oh.
there, okay? So genius ideas don't have to come from CEOs or scientists or famous artists. They can come from anybody. And
Hmm.
turns out there's actually a really weak correlation, going using my math brain again for a second,
Yeah.
between the greatness of an idea and the greatness of the person originating that idea.
Mm.
And so these two problems mean that like companies are basically only looking to hear ideas or create ideas from their senior people or the people who are important already. And number two, they're only waiting to hear good ideas. And if you say a bad idea or an idea that turns out to be stupid, they whack you, they slap you around
Hmm.
a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So there's you use terms of psychological safety. So it frustrates us because that's like well researched. I mean, it's obviously the software that I sell that solves those problems, but beyond that, it is incredibly well researched that you need to be willing to listen to anybody's ideas. And number
Yeah.
two, you need to be comfortable with like 98% of the stuff you're going to listen to, whether from a genius or from an idiot, is going to be garbage. And that's okay because the 2% is going to be awesome.
Absolutely. So where do you find in your life, being that your business is to help others or generate ideas and solutions for other people's organizations, where does that generating ideas and solutions come up in your own life, in like your everyday life?
Sure. So I'll give two examples. The first was before I joined IdeaScale and I didn't know this type of software existed. I would have just on an Evernote notebook, I would just list a bunch of ideas I had, stock investments or business ideas or a book I want to write at some point in my life. Just a huge list of ideas. And most of
Mhm.
them, if I look back, I looked at this list actually last week. And it's like most of these ideas are crappy. They were like, a 3 a.m. guy who hasn't slept for like 24 hours. You know, those hallucinations you have which seem
Uh,
great at the time, they're terrible. So that's where it used to come out. I used to just keep a running list of, hey, here's something I would like to do eventually, and I think it's a good idea right now, but let me reflect on it when I have time to actually do so. And then in a professional life, so that's actually what IdeaScale software does, by the way. It keeps track of teams or an individual's ideas and helps you rank them. So where it comes to play in my professional life is funnily enough, we use our own software so we're a software company. We're always thinking about what new features to develop, what new old features to kill. And so everyone in the company, actually anybody in the world, contributes ideas on how to make IdeaScale software better. And some of those, if you go to ideas.ideascale.com, you can see all the ideas that our employees have submitted, our customers, random students from around the world. And a lot of those ideas are garbage. It's okay because like the top 5 or 10% are actually really cool. They rise to the top by kind of algorithms and voting, and those are the ones that actually turn into that go into the product. And that's
mm,
in a really effective way of doing kind of distributed brainstorming and distributed ranking of creativity or ideas. Because again, I want to emphasize that like most creativity is actually terrible, and that's okay.
yeah, I agree. And I think people are engaging in it not for the end product, but for the experience and for the process of creativity too. Yeah, to contribute, like you were saying, whether it's a good idea or not, that sense of contribution or connection you get from sharing your idea with others is, I think, an important part of being human and an important part of being in a community and having that support as
people
well.
like people like talking, but as you said it earlier, they need the comfort, the kind of the psychological comfort that they're not going
Yeah.
to be ridiculed because either their idea is stupid or because the person who they are, right?
Mm,
We often hear about discrimination, but because if you look a certain way, nobody listens to your idea, or they laugh at you, or they criticize, oh, you said it in a funny accent. Like that's not
right.
okay, and that actually detracts from creativity.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think it's a part of the creative experience that many people don't talk about or don't have an awareness of because, well, because of so many reasons, but because of kind of what people assume or their bias is around who can be creative, what constitutes creativity, and where it can come from. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm curious. I mean, you strike me as someone who is able to draw inspiration from a lot of places, but who or what inspires you in your life these days?
Um, These days. Okay, so I'll give two or three examples. Number one, I'm reading Paradise Lost, which is this old like poem from like 400 years ago, 300 years ago. And this is one of those in reading this poem, and I'm not a religious man myself, but it feels like God was speaking to this guy. It's the
Mm,
story of Adam and Eve and of Genesis,
hmm
but not being a religious guy, and it still seems like God was speaking to him because it is so beautifully written.
mm.
And I wish at some point in my life I have that kind of genius level of inspiration. Now that's a high bar, right? It's one poem gets written like this every 100 years or so.
Sure.
Um, second is uh, Second is what is it? Why am I blanking? Bill Gates. I really liked how the guy just started a business, like drops out of Harvard, starts a business, and it's like Microsoft is one of the few software companies that has been around forever,
Hmm.
right? Like most other tech companies, they've only been around like 10 or 20 years. Microsoft's been around since what, like the 80s or 70s? Like
Yeah.
it's been through every generation. I remember when Windows was not a thing, there were other like operating systems there,
Hmm.
right? And now we have, now it's the biggest investor in OpenAI for ChatGPT, so it has continued. So I like the idea of building a technology company that
Mm.
realizes you always have to be innovative rather than selling the same product. Because we've seen so many companies come and go. Intel just a few weeks ago
Hmm.
started crashing horribly. They had to let go of their CEO. And that was a company that hasn't weathered the generational shifts in technology. Um, so I like that Bill Gates created a company that where that was part of the culture that you're going to be
Hmm.
permanently creative.
Nice. And I'm curious, just more on a more personal level, being a new father, where does creativity show up in that area of your life?
Trying to figure out how to balance a child while doing other things. So,
Yeah.
like, am I holding a child with one hand? Okay, I still want to be typing or I don't know, doing something with my other hand. So, how do I balance the child on one knee, hold the bottle with the other hand, and try and type with the other hand? So, I've discovered all sorts of interesting ways to safely balance a child while supporting his head. There's all these parameters, right? You got to support his head. You got
Yeah.
to make sure it's at a slight angle so he can eat and not choke on the bottle. You have to make sure he's balanced so he doesn't fall off your knee onto the ground, all sorts of things, while still doing other things in life. Because you can't let go of the baby, otherwise they stop crying. So you get
Ah,
really creative fast on physical juggling.
absolutely. Oh my goodness, is very true. What's one of your favorite parts of your role in your company?
So as CEO, I think I have a bunch of different jobs. There's two things I really like about it. Number one is that my job is often to balance different demands.
Mm.
Okay, and that's really
Mhm.
tough. Engineering may want one thing, marketing may want one thing, product may want another thing, and they're all right in isolation, but that is not necessarily the best thing for the company. And often compromise, I like that. Coming to a rational compromise and explaining that. And then secondly, I like that I can jump in on almost any part of the company. So if somebody needs me to
Mhm.
go work on product for a little bit or marketing, I love that, each week can be a totally different job, and that's usually not true for most other roles. Like if you're a salesperson, that's all you do all year round. As
Mhm.
CEO, you're jumping between sales to engineering to marketing to operations to customer support all the time.
Ah, yes. I love it. And I imagine working in all those different areas and you run across employees and other people who may struggle a little bit with creativity. How would you encourage others to find creativity in their life?
Um, I think the biggest thing, it goes back to those two forms of creativity we were discussing before, that
Hmm.
most creativity is actually permutations of existing knowledge. And the only way you can be permute existing knowledge is if you have the existing knowledge. So
Mm.
the tautological implication is go learn new stuff. Go read a book, go learn a new skill, go take a course, go learn a new sport. It doesn't have to be academic. The more skills or knowledge you accumulate in any sphere of life, that provides you a more fertile ground for subsequently permuting that knowledge into a new context, which again is 99.94% of all creativity.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, trying new things. I'm curious, what are the things in your life that you have in your mind of like, oh, those are the new things I want to try to keep growing and offering new opportunities in your own life?
Sure. So, there's two things I'm trying to learn right now. Number one is reading. I haven't really read much in like 20 years, never read any of the great literature.
Hmm.
So I'm not yet to the point of writing anything, certainly, but I want to go read this stuff. It's a new area of like language of philosophy that I'm not aware of at all, and I want to go learn that. Um, and second is programming. Haven't really programmed in like 20 years, and now with this all these new tools coming out, programming has become so easy that I want to go develop the skill set, especially
Mm.
working and leading a technology company. It's nice that I know the theory of programming, but I should be going to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Mm.
It's both a useful skill and a cool skill and a powerful skill. Like, fun example, one Saturday morning about 3 weeks ago, I rebuilt the game Flappy Bird just for fun. So it's totally available. I rebuilt it. It's not as beautiful as the one that went viral, 5 or 10 years ago,
Hmm.
pretty good because I wrote it in like 20 lines of code in an hour while drinking coffee and balancing a baby. So with one hand.
Is there a picture of you doing that somewhere?
No, no, because then I need a third hand to do the selfie, and I didn't have.
Right,
I'm not
right.
that good.
Not yet, not
Unless I'm
yet.
one of those, those people, those musicians who've got like a harmonica, a drum, and a
Yeah,
cymbal. If I have that sort of like body rig, maybe I'll be able to pull that off.
then you could do it. I can see that. I can picture that world where you're documenting all of those moments. I love it. Well, this has been such a treat to chat with you. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
I get a rush of adrenaline whenever I notice that I've done something cool. Adrenaline's the wrong word, a rush of joy. And this
Mm.
is me getting a little like fluffy, but I feel human beings, they get joy from doing something new or from something creative,
Mhm.
or at least I certainly do. So that's what it feels like. I feel like joy. I go rush to my wife and tell her, "Hey, I did something really cool today." Or I remember telling that to my parents. And it doesn't have to be great from a humanity perspective. It's like I did something new, and it could be bad, but it's still new and cool.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that piece in your experience and everything you've shared today. If people want to learn more about you and your company and all of the things you have in the world, how could they go about doing that?
Sure. It's three ways. If you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn, my name is Nick Jain. Usually the first search result, DM me. I'll be glad to respond. Secondly, if you want to see the random projects that I'm working on personally, my website is nickjain.com. Very simple. And thirdly, if you want to check out IdeaScale, our website is ideascale.com. By the way, our software is completely free for teams or organizations less than 100 people. So if you're an individual entrepreneur or 99% team at a billion-dollar company, software is completely free. I encourage people to check it out.
That is awesome and amazing that it's available. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Mari. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.